Israel intensifies its bombardment in and around Gaza's second largest city, Khan Yunis, as hundreds have died since last week's truce ended. No country is on track to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions, the Climate Action Tracker says as delegates at COP28 gather in Dubai.
Chaos and significant disruptions on Poland's southeastern borders as the blockade on Ukrainian trucks crossing into the EU continues.
Israel has intensified its ground and air bombardment of Khan Yunis in Gaza in its push for a definite military victory over Hamas. Casualties and others fleeing the fighting poured into the Nasser hospital in the southern city. Israeli forces also targeted the Jabalia area of Gaza after warning civilians to flee further south. Many of those had already been forced to move from their homes in the north, and NGOs say there is nowhere safe for people to go. The Palestinian Health Ministry says several hundred people have been killed since last week's truce ended. Palestinian militants are continuing to fight street by street, as this video by Islamic Jihad purports to show. The IDF says scores of its soldiers have died in combat since the ground offensive began. And Hamas continues to fire rockets towards Israel, with the city of Ashkelon among the latest targets. It was Hamas's brutal raid into Israel that killed at least 1,200 people that triggered the war. It continues to hold more than 100 hostages.
Delegates at the COP28 summit in Dubai have been digesting a series of grim reports about the state of the climate and efforts to stem global warming. Euronews correspondent Jeremy Wilkes brings us the latest from the UN conference.
The Climate Action Tracker shows that no country around the world is actually on track to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions in order to meet the 1.5 degree target of the Paris Agreement. We also had the Global Carbon Project, which revealed that emissions in 2023 rose by 1.1% globally, over 8% rise in India. And we had the World Meteorological Organization's Decadal Review, which evens out all of the changes you may see because of La Nina or El Nino. And it's a pretty bleak outlook for our planet. I spoke to the report author.
We're seeing accelerating climate change across a wide range of areas of the climate system. We see continuing increases in global temperatures. We see sea level rise happening at an increasing rate. We see ice sheet loss happening at an increasing rate. We see the oceans getting warmer and more acidic. So we're seeing changes across much of the climate system, and they're generally changes which are not going in a good direction.
In the face of such evidence, what we really need to do is to change the conversation, according to Bertrand Piccard, the founder of the Solar Impulse Foundation.
We need to show the solutions more than the problems. We need to show that decarbonization has to be made through a profitable modernization of the countries, by having more efficiency, stopping to waste energy and resources and polluting, but also stopping to waste money. So there is a climate urgency, yes, but there is an economic imperative that can probably be much more motivating for the world of economy, industry and politics.
With those thoughts and those reports in mind, the big question now is whether, at the end of this conference, we will get an agreement to phase out fossil fuels. Jeremy Wilkes at COP28 in Dubai for Euronews.
The Donana National Park in El Rocío, southern Spain, a labyrinth of lagoons, wetlands and lush plains, vital to the survival of rare and endangered birds. Despite appearances, these marshes are drying out.
El resto de las marismas, el 98% está absolutamente seca, debido en parte a la falta de precipitación, y el acuífero ha sido expoliado de tal manera que ya no descarga agua sobre los arroyos.
According to the latest figures, only half of the birds that usually stop to winter here have arrived due to intensive fruit farming and climate change.
Estamos sacando mucha más agua de la que realmente disponemos.
The reduction in rainfall and the overexploitation of the groundwater to cultivate berries through illegal wells like this one has pushed the national park to the brink of collapse. While it has boosted UNESCO World Heritage status for 43 years, the UN body says it will withdraw its recognition if the government doesn't take steps to protect the site. It has since presented a €1.4 billion plan to save the wetlands.
El nuevo plan prevé la sustitución de algunos de estos invernaderos por cultivos de secano o devolver los terrenos a su situación original.
Farmers around Donana will receive up to €100,000 per hectare if they stop producing crops which consume large quantities of groundwater. But these smallholders are questioning the move and say efforts must be made to clamp down on those illegally tapping water.
Hay un trasvase desde la cuenca vecina del Tinto Dielipede aprobado de 20 hectómetros. Sería, si se pudiera materializar completamente ese trasvase, reducir a la mitad las extracciones del acuífero.
La única forma de adaptarnos es eliminar el uso ilegal del agua y recuperar esa dinámica de los ríos y arroyos que vertían antiguamente a Doñana.
The future of Donana hangs in the balance, and the World Heritage Committee will examine the government's conservation efforts at the UN's Climate Change Summit in Dubai.
Ongoing protests at the Poland-Ukraine border by transport companies and truck drivers, with farmers now joining in. The blockade against Ukrainian trucks has created lengthy queues, causing significant disruptions, worsened by winter conditions.
А нас найвипустив wszystkich додому. Ну, така просьба, и то не есть нормальный, кто пришел и 3 недели пробыл в кабине.
Volunteers are providing Ukrainian drivers with food. Artom is Ukrainian and has lived in Poland for years.
Przyjechaliśmy z jedzeniem, mamy gorącą zupkę. Wszystko takie podstawowe rzeczy, które kierowcy potrzebują, które tu stoją po prostu.
One of the main complaints by Polish transport companies is the scrapping of permits for drivers from Ukraine in order to prevent transport disruptions.
To jest postulat skierowany do strony ukraińskiej o wyłączenie unijnych kierowców z patologicznego systemu, który nazywamy tą ekolejkę, regulujący wyjazd z Ukrainy, wjazd do Polski. My w oczekiwaniu na ten wyjazd jest czasem dla nas stracony. My po prostu musimy tam spędzić ileś dni, z reguły to na ten moment jest około 12-14 dni tego oczekiwania. W samochodach czekamy.
The second important issue is with the European Commission and its restrictions on the number of trucks transiting Ukraine and the EU. They were changed to help Ukraine after the Russian invasion.
Odstąpienie od niekorzystnej umowy Unia Europejska-Ukraina, umowy likwidującej system wzajemnych zezwoleń, które dotychczas regulowały stosunki Ukraina-Unia Europejska, jeżeli chodzi o sektor przewozowy. Całkowita likwidacja systemu zezwoleń, co zrobiła Bruksela, destabilizuje zupełnie rynek i potrzebujemy powrotu do normalnej sytuacji, w której przedsiębiorcy z obu stron zarabiają, wiedzą na czym stoją.
It has already been a month of protests at the borders with Ukraine, and in recent days Poles have also been joined by truck drivers in Slovakia. Magdalena Hodownik for Euronews from Dorohusk.
The European Union and the White House both say they're running out of money for Ukraine. The EU is currently disputing a €50 billion allocation to the war-battered nation, endangering crucial promises to Kyiv made months ago. Meanwhile, President Vladimir Putin's press secretary said Russia's economy is adapting well.
Наверное, это скорее вопрос самих европейцев. Понятно, что им становится все тяжелее полить деньги в бездонной бочке украинской. А что касается нас, то наша экономика адаптировалась к условиям специальной военной операции и обеспечивает необходимый режим для продолжения.
In the United States, the Biden administration has warned Congress about the need to approve tens of billions of dollars in military and economic assistance to Ukraine. The country's budget director says the US will run out of funding to send weapons and assistance to Kyiv by the end of the year. And she said that without it, Ukraine's efforts to defend itself from the Russian invasion may grind to a halt. It's not good news in the classroom. While Asia, with Singapore in the lead, stands out once again in the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development's latest PISA education survey published on Tuesday, there's been an unprecedented drop in performance across its 81 member countries. The survey is carried out every 3 years by the Paris-based organisation to assess the ability of 15-year-olds to meet real-life challenges. The current edition shows decreasing achievements in mathematics, reading comprehension and the sciences. This was the first large-scale study since COVID-19, but it found that shutdowns during the pandemic were not the only reason for the downturn. Other factors include the quality of teaching and the level of support pupils received at school. In Europe, top of the class was Estonia, with the EU's two biggest countries, Germany and France, ranked below Switzerland, Ireland, Belgium and Britain. The survey also looked at the impact of technology on education. It found that moderate use of digital devices in school is associated with higher performance, but this depends on whether it was being used to support rather than distract from learning.
France's National Assembly has unanimously approved a bill to ban single-use, disposable electronic cigarettes, commonly known as puffs, an attempt to protect young people drawn to their flavours and mitigate the environmental impacts. Politicians adopted the bill on Monday. With government backing, it will now move to the Senate, where it is expected to be adopted and could be in effect by September next year. Health officials say 5% of French people are daily vapers, one of the highest vaping countries in the EU.
Edinburgh Zoo has said goodbye to a pair of giant pandas who are returning home to China. Yangguang and Tiantian have been a popular attraction in the Scottish capital since their arrival in 2011. They were the only pandas in the UK, but failed to produce any offspring. The pair are the latest animals to leave the West after exchange agreements expired and have not been renewed by China, possibly due to tensions with Western governments.